So this is a unconventional video from, I guess, the both of us. I mean, we both like Universal monster movies. We both talk about them ad nauseum at length. But of course, I'm joined by my good buddy Pyramid Head from all the way over in the middle of America, as per usual.
Yes, that's me. I actually used to do this stuff about new movies all the time on camera, and I just got sick of doing it.
I don't mind the occasional on-camera thing, but I feel like it's way more work for like basically the same result.
Yeah, and doing it over audio, reduces the chances of me looking like a dipshit.
Wait, so
So,
that means that if I dig back far enough, I can find raw footage. I don't think I've ever seen
oh
you in my
no,
life.
no, I got so tired of those videos. I just went in like a year or two ago, and they're all like unlisted now.
Oh man, I'll just assume that you look like the Giga Chad meme and move on. So we're here to talk about, of course, 2023's, I was going to say blockbuster hit, but it's not making that much money. The Last Voyage of the Demeter.
Yeah, it's only made like $2 million on like a $40 million budget.
That's
Oof.
sad. And I think what's even sadder is the fact that it's getting like a 45% critic rating on Rotten Tomatoes. It's getting mixed reviews.
I'm not going to go too deeply into this, but I read some of the blurbs and I feel like we watched a different movie because I saw more than one saying that, like, oh, it was good, and then it just throws out the horror and turns into an action movie. And watching it, it's like, unless you count every single horror or monster movie where they fight back against the bad guy at the end, this is not an action movie.
No, there's like, what, 6, 7 minutes of action total?
Yeah, it's like 6, 7 minutes of them fighting back, and spoilers, I guess, not doing a great job at it. And Dr. Dre lays down the hot diss track on Dracula at one
Right.
point.
That is a great vague way to describe it. I guess we'll keep it mostly spoiler free for the first part, just to
Yeah,
get
it's
the ball
because like
rolling.
the big thing we have to talk about in terms of spoilers is that ending.
Right. That's what I think we both have the most opinions on. So this makes sense to save it to the end. Just why don't we start at the start? What were your initial impressions like when you saw like trailers and the poster and getting close to the
I
release date?
was I was excited because I have kind of a history with this thing.
This specific movie?
Yeah, Last Voyage of, well, the project Last Voyage of the Demeter, because I first heard about this back in like 2009.
Oh wow. Oh, you're
Because
so fucking plugged in. God
well,
damn you.
I wasn't back then. I only heard about it because I was reading a lot of like Rotten Tomatoes articles because they used to actually have really good articles back in like 2008, 2009 ish.
That's how far back, huh?
Yeah,
Wow.
and then they because they would do like a series of articles where someone who hasn't seen the film franchise would watch every part of it and then write about it once a week or once a day. 'Cause the first one they did was on the Bond movies, and then that went over, so I just kept doing it. And like one of the ones they did was Friday the 13th, and leading up to the remake that came out, and it got mentioned because the director of that was supposed to do this,
Wow.
and
Wait,
he
how
was like he was like the third or fourth of like seven directors who've been attached to this over the years.
how many years back does this movie go?
The original spec was written in 2002. Now I don't have that draft,
Wow.
but that's how far back the idea goes.
I didn't even realize that. I thought this was like, like any other movie, like it was maybe 4 or 5 years old of the script and then you hire people slowly. But like, damn, that's developed for a long time.
No, in fact, I did an episode in 2019 on a 2006 draft.
Of this?
Yeah, it's
Holy
very,
crap.
very different from what the movie ended up being.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But yeah, I do that, and like a couple weeks later, like a week later, someone's like the episode drops. A fan sends me a 2010 draft. I start reading that. I read that actually. I read the whole thing, and then like a couple weeks later, they announce this movie,
Wow. That's actually pretty funny.
and it somehow did not fall apart through all of COVID.
No, yeah, it persevered, unlike the Demeter.
Oh yeah. Well, the Demeter made it to port. It just
Yeah, I guess in the spirit of Demeter, it sadly limped its way to the end. But no, I mean, I think you and I both said it. We're fans of this movie.
yeah.
Neither of us would give it a 10 or anything like that, but we both really like this movie. So,
Yeah, do we start with a score or do we just?
I mean, we can start with a score. I would probably give it an 8. I mean, I was thinking like between 7 and 8 for a while, but at the end of the day, I lean more positive. And granted, I'm highly biased. I'm a huge Dracula fan, and maybe just a part of this is like oh my god, it's so the Dracula that I've been waiting to see on screen for like my whole life. They're usually like goofy caricatures, you know? So I'm really glad we got this, but even still, it's very well executed and it immerses you. It really puts you there.
Yeah, it's a really because it's one of those things where you first hear about the idea. It's like, how has no one ever thought of doing this before?
Right. The main criticism with book adaptations to like in any movie, any franchise is, oh, the movie is only so long, you cram in so much. Well, what if you take one chapter and make a movie out of it? Like that holy crap, what an interesting idea. I'm surprised it's not done more often.
Yeah, to like really milk the source material.
For everything it's worth, baby.
I mean, we kind of basically got that with Breaking Dawn Part 1 and 2, because there is not two movies worth of material in that book.
So I keep hearing. Yeah, no. Obviously, Mud and Ian have read those. I'm very happy to have not.
I read them years ago. I don't remember why.
Yeah, you have to explain yourself on that one.
It's a long. It was a long time ago.
They're gonna be like, it's a low point in my life, man. Twilight came around.
I was in high school.
Oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, so here we are at Demeter, and I, above all else, if nothing else, if it accomplishes nothing else in its entire life, I have to say that this movie is the most book accurate Dracula adaptation I've ever seen across movies, across TV shows, and I've seen a lot of them. Maybe not all of them, obviously, there's a ton of them, but this is like so dead on. I felt like I was just reading the Dracula book, which is hilarious.
Yes, I think I've read Dracula is the second most adapted literary character of all time.
Is it Sherlock that's number one?
Yeah, it's Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah, that's what I read too. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense.
I mean, Basil Rathbone alone did like 14 movies.
He sure did. And one of them is a Universal Monster movie, kind of, not really.
Kind of.
But yeah, so Demeter, I'm a big fan of the style and, like I said earlier, the tone. I think it's just it so nails the environment and the immersion. And again, what we have the most opinions on is the ending. But before the very, very end of the movie, it's through and through a conventional horror movie that just it pretends like the book is like lore, like the book is like written in universe, because that's how Dracula's book is structured, is like its characters, it's epistolary, like a novel like that.
Yeah. In fact, this chapter of the book is a newspaper article that has the relevant excerpts from the captain's log printed in it.
What it really has going for it, when I was looking at the posters and the trailer and stuff, was the design of Dracula is very Nosferatu. And that's so interesting because Nosferatu obviously was like inspired by like a knockoff of Dracula because they couldn't use the rights to Dracula. So it's really interesting to see that like this design is influenced full circle by Nosferatu, which is super cool.
Well, the first most detailed take on the Voyage was in Nosferatu.
Yeah.
Like that really stands out because you get to the Lugosi movie and they use stock footage.
Mm-hmm.
And like it's a little bit in the Langella movie. You get that insane montage in the Coppola movie.
Yeah, the most memorable thing about the Langella movie was when the wolf ran out of the boat. Which, sorry, I'm going to drop a minor spoiler for the audience. That does not happen in Demeter. Everything else relevant to the chapter happened in Demeter except the wolf running out of the boat.
Yeah, it's almost like we put all our money and our budget into making Dracula into this winged bat monster. We can't afford a wolf.
It feels, was it a creative decision? Because he was already...
It might have been, yeah.
At that point in the script, he was already flying around. So I guess you could think like, well, why would he go back onto the ship and then turn into a wolf and run away from the ship when he could just fly onto the shore?
Yeah, well, the other thing I want to say about this just in general is that it's the whole idea of it being contained to the ship with something people don't know what the hell it is.
Yep.
Is really cool. In fact, the inspiration for this movie was the original writer, Bragi Shute, who, by the way, to get you even more hyped for this movie, he also wrote the first Escape Room.
Oh, did he? Oh, let's go.
And he basically said he wanted to write something like Alien, but didn't want to do it in space because it would just be a ripoff. And then he became friends with like this effects guy who had the model of the Demeter from the Francis Ford Coppola film in the studio, and he saw that and went, there's the idea.
I have not seen the Coppola film in so long.
It's worth watching. It's insane.
It is. I remember Keanu Reeves' accent sticks out.
I know where the bastard sleeps.
The bastard. Yeah. It's fantastic. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Alien, but not in space. That kind of is what the Demeter chapter is. I love the mystery. I know, like, with CGI movies, it's always like, oh, they barely use it because they can't afford to use it. In this movie, it did feel like they barely used it because intentionally they wanted that air of mystery around it. I felt like it was a deliberate choice not to do that, and that felt good.
You see, I keep seeing people saying that they used it too much.
Really? Dude, there's barely any fucking Dracula in these. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, and to add another connection to that movie, the draft I did the episode on, way back now, was revised by the guy who wrote Coppola's Dracula, James V. Hart.
Oh, wow. That's really funny.
Not credited on this movie.
That's true. I mean, I did mention CGI, but I mean, Javier Botet, or however you say his name, he practically did portray Dracula. I mean, we don't have behind the scenes yet, but it really did look like a lot of really talented makeup artists just lathered him up and had him go be creepy.
There was a behind the scenes clip on Twitter where they were showing him in the makeup.
Really? Okay, good. Then it is actual makeup. Yeah,
Yeah, it is makeup, and there's some CGI used here. It's like a mix.
Most of the shots of Dracula are just him being mad creepy in the corner and killing people and blood's everywhere, and it's awesome. So
yeah, and this is the better of the two Universal monster movies he was in.
Oh, which was the other one?
He's in The Mummy, the Tom Cruise one.
Oh my God. Oh, he is Set. That's
he's just in the background in a couple of random scenes.
That's, yeah, really finally got a glory shot in a Universal Monster movies, finally, at this point. Redemption, as it were.
Redemption for being in that movie for 30 seconds, most of which was repeated throughout the film.
And now he is the main, I was going to say titular character, but that means he's the boat. He's the main monster who is on the titular character of the Demeter the whole time.
The boat does not come to life like in Jason and the Argonauts.
Tragic, really. It really should have. Well, if it did, it sure did die at the end.
Yeah. At the beginning, really, because it starts at the end.
It does start at the end. I don't really know why. I guess maybe that part is for audiences that don't know about Dracula the book.
Okay, that drove me insane because I thought the opening was good, but the opening text actually wasn't that bad. But I almost had an Ian moment in the theater when that last line gets thrown up. They just go, based on the captain's log from Dracula. Why are you putting a sentence from the press release in your movie?
I think they have to. I'm pretty sure anything adapted from anything has to say based on blah, blah, blah by blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, but they don't do it in the movie.
Yeah, that's a good point.
They just stuck it into a text scroll where suddenly it's like, it's being meta now. What?
Yeah, that's a good point. It should have been at a different location, as it were. I really like how close it stuck to the lore, even if things were unexplained unless you've read the book. Like, in the movie, like, let's say that you don't know about the plot of Dracula the book. In the movie, they don't explain the 50 things of soil. They just say that the buyer was anonymous, which implies Dracula. But the movie never makes it clear that he's trying to bring his coffins to take over the world and stuff like that, which is hilariously the whole plot of the book. I like how the movie, it's like you're in the know if you know, but if you don't, it's just a mysterious aspect of the movie. So that's kind of cool.
Well, they show all the boxes getting loaded, so you know there's a bunch. The thing I really liked about this is that they never actually know anything at all about the rules.
Yeah,
like they just try things and they guess and they get lucky. There's no one who turns up who's like goes, "Huh, conveniently, I know all about vampires."
Yeah, exactly.
Like in the one draft, there's like this Polynesian guy on the boat who apparently ran into a vampire in his homeland, and he has like a friggin' like war club that's like good for killing the undead. I'm like, what the hell?
This is in a different draft of the same movie?
Yes. This is the 2006 one.
I am so glad that wasn't in the movie. Oh, that sounds so much worse. I mean, I would love to see like a movie with like, you know, a monster people have never heard of. And then one guy shows up and he's like, I have all the answers. They actually act like this. And then none of them work.
Yeah. Although some of the rules don't work in this, as we see.
True. I mean, you know my peeve. Sunlight is a Nosferatu lethal thing for vampires. So prior to Nosferatu, sunlight did not kill vampires. Bram Stoker's Dracula did not have that happen.
No,
Carmilla,
it just made them normal.
it just made them normal. It kept them normal, or I think in Bram Stoker's version, it keeps them whatever form they are. Whatever. It wasn't a good thing for them, but it didn't kill them. And then Nosferatu, the ending, he blows up when they open the curtain. And now forever in vampire lore and in pop culture, it's just, sunlight is just explosive.
So funny for a movie that hardly anybody saw at the time because it was in legal trouble.
Sure was. And now both Universal Dracula adaptations this year have sunlight like immediately kill you.
And we're getting another Nosferatu movie.
But yeah. No, Demeter, people say adaptation, like they change things, they adapt things. It's like a translation almost of that 7th chapter of the book.
Just massively expanded.
Massively expanded. And yeah, the last like 2 minutes, they make some creative decisions, which we are still both saving.
Yeah, I gotta talk about that because there's a couple weird things I gotta mention. But just the movie as a whole is just it's a good like contained monster horror movie. You got some great scenes on deck. The vampires used really well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The implementation of the monster character, it didn't feel like oh, they're showing it whenever they can. It didn't feel exploitative, but it also didn't feel too sparing. If anything, I thought maybe a little sparing. They could have used a little bit more Dracula, but hey, I'm just kind of nitpicking at that point. I liked what they did with him.
Yeah, it was a cool idea to just show the monster side of Dracula. Just to have a movie that focuses on that. And for people who aren't really going to find much out about him, that's a good way to go about it.
Yeah, I keep thinking about him in relation to other adaptations, and it's so unique because other adaptations of Dracula is a man, like a charming, suave, kind of evil guy who turns into a monster or controls monsters or whatever, and like has these tendencies. Whereas this, first and foremost, is like a demon beast who's also really smart and evil. And I really like the subtle allusions to the charming Dracula. Like when he's killing a guy and he turns his head, you see like a smirk more often than not. You see him like enjoying what he's doing, and I'm like, that's what makes it not like just generic horror movie monster number 17. Like that's actually Dracula right there.
And the couple times he does speak, it's almost purely to mess with somebody.
Yes, it's just fucking with him. And like, that's such a Dracula thing to me. I will say though, in a way, it reminds me a lot of Robert Pattinson's Batman in the sense that Robert Pattinson is nailing the Batman character. But my only gripe with that, his interpretation, is that you don't see the Bruce Wayne false persona where he's charming and suave. You only see that. And Demeter kind of does the same thing. Like, if it weren't for those little personality tics that I just referred to, you wouldn't be able to differentiate it from, like, a beast. You know? It's you don't really see the other side of him because in the movie there isn't another side. Even at the end, and we're not talking about the end yet, but, like, when he's a normal guy, quote unquote, he still looks like fucking Gollum.
Yeah, he does.
Does nobody notice this guy?
Yeah, that was strange because they go out of their way earlier in the movie to go, oh, he can take on human form.
Yeah, like 90-year-old human form. And I know that's kind of in the book, but like that did not look like a guy. He looked like a goblin.
Yeah, it looked like the White Orc from the Hobbit movies.
It did. It did with the hook nose and all.
But another thing is that they made use of like so many different things in the ship setting. Like they go up in the rigging, it's at night on deck.
Yep.
And like going into creeping around in like the packed full storage hold, like using the narrow corridors.
Sure, yeah.
And showing how he can like, because there's scenes where he's like hiding in like hatches, and he hides in like that. There's a scene where like he's not in it. It's some other threat that's going on. And then all the time he was right there in a cabinet.
Yeah. Yes, it's
that
so
was
interesting.
cool.
Or like the scene where the boy is hiding from that possessed vampire guy who's running towards the door and hits his head. And as soon as the boy locks himself in the room, in my mind I was like, Dracula's in that room. And then they like kept showing the room and I was like, oh, okay, they're not going to go down that road. And then he was, and I was like, I knew it. I should have fucking guessed. Because like Dracula, I mean, depending on how many book powers they want to pull in, he has like 15 different ways to enter that room.
Oh yeah, turn into
He
fog.
could just be mist.
Turn into one of the rats.
Yeah, control weather. I don't know how that helps, but it's relevant.
Make themselves really small and get through tiny gaps.
Exactly. He could do the thing that Universal is saying is not just a Dracula Untold thing and turn into a bunch of bats.
And just punch. I actually was thinking during the movie, I actually thought it was kind of funny. He's not killing these people because he's hungry. Because they get the offer. We're like, oh, we'll get this big bonus if we get him to England on time and don't stop. I think he just doesn't want to pay the bonus.
I never thought of that. He is the buyer of the coffins. He's the guy who purveyed them.
Yeah.
That's so funny. Because, like, yeah, that's the whole crew's motivation for not turning around earlier on is that they want the bonus. That's a really funny take.
He says he's just a dick 1%er.
Yeah, literally. It was like, fuck it. But, yeah, no, I kept thinking about that, too. It's like, damn, he's feeding, like, several times every night with, like, this. He's not even drinking all of their blood. He's drinking, like, a part of their blood and leaving. Like, he's well fed. Plus, he ate the whole livestock in, like, one night.
Yeah.
So he's not fiending for blood right now.
Yeah,
So
the
he's
livestock
definitely sport
and
at this
the
point.
dog.
I don't know. I like that Dracula as a character has such a sadistic nature that he's willing to pick them off one by one. And when I saw the movie, I was talking to my buddy about this too. Like, he starts, just like in the book, he starts at the least important on the ship. So obviously he starts with the livestock, then moves his way up from like random crewman number 17 all the way to the captain being the last one, which I think is really interesting. And I thought about too, like, oh, hey, in the movie, the captain was like the second to or third to last one. But in the captain's log, him saying he's the last one, he wouldn't have known later on. He didn't write the log after he died.
Yeah.
So I guess that checks out. They lined it up so well because he even has the freaking rosary in his hand too. He has the crucifix.
Yeah,
they
lined it up so well, and then he immediately gets untied, and it's like, ah, shit.
Yeah, that's a good point. But yeah, they're playing around. You can tell, like, maybe I would guess, and you can tell me if I'm wrong here. I would guess the initial, like, the earlier versions of the script were maybe 100% accurate, and then like producers come in and change things.
No. They still expanded and changed a bunch of stuff. Like the 2006 draft, I think it's been a while. I've only read the 2004 one once, but the 2006 one, they make the Demeter into like a steamship.
Don't like that.
And Dracula has like this fungus he can control, and it gets into the engine and controls where it goes.
Oh, that's actually pretty cool. Wait a minute.
There's a lot of stuff because that version was supposed to be directed by a special effects guy, and so there's all this like effects related stuff thrown in there. Like they add in like a character who's like a really obvious red herring, who's the guy who brokers the deal, and they're like, oh, this guy is the vampire. Then he steps out on deck in sunlight. Oh, I guess he's not. What's going on? And then it turns out he's like a servant.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. That sounds way less book accurate. So you're saying the opposite happened, where they revised it to be more accurate.
Yeah, unless the original script was closer, which I haven't read. Like there was some interesting ties to the book in some of the earlier ones. Like in the 2004 and 2006 drafts, the main character is like a completely different guy who's like from the area, and he knows about who Dracula is. And in both versions, Dracula like kills his son, and he like chases after Dracula to go after him. And in the 2004 draft, he's the father of the baby that Dracula feeds to the brides.
Okay.
Which I thought was interesting.
I don't know. That feels very It feels like I've seen it 1,000 times before, which I do not have that quality having watched the movie.
No.
So.
And the other thing that's like vastly different between the different scripts is the female character. She has like a completely different backstory. She's not connected to Dracula at all.
Oh, I'm glad that she was. It felt more relevant to have her as the character she was.
The idea was cool that he basically brought a snack along with him.
Yeah. Kind of watched the movie like, okay, this is a divergence from the book. But then I thought like, oh, wait, no, we've only ever read the captain's logs. Why would the captain happen to be like, oh, and also there's this XYZ. All the movie did was expand and add context to the entries between the logs in the book of Dracula. So in that way, it's really interesting.
It's interesting, although he would have mentioned the stowaway.
Yeah, he probably would have mentioned the stowaway. Maybe I'm stretching a little
bit. Maybe the
the
newspaper cut that excerpt out.
Yeah, ooh, that's a good get out of jail free card if you're the writer. Like, well, maybe they just didn't publish that. They didn't publish the log where he said, actually, I got untied briefly, and then the other guy was the last one on the ship. But that was the immediate next log. I swear to God.
Swear to God, that was my.
Do we have any other thoughts about the non-ending?
Before we get to the ending,
Yep.
just like I mean, there's like a couple little things throughout the movie that kind of don't add up a bit. Like the one scene I keep seeing people complain about is them finding the coffin and then not doing anything about it. But then you think about it, like there's not really anything they could have done about it. It's just weird they never bring it up again.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, what is there to do? I mean, this is like the late 1800s, when the book came out. You can't call for help. You can't inform anybody. You got a dude with a quill, the captain, writing a log by hand. That's it. There's like a couple like lifeboats, and one of the characters does play chicken and finally use one, which I thought that scene, as soon as he gets in the boat and goes away, I'm like, that kid's done. He's not making it anywhere.
Yeah, that's a sequence that goes back very, very far. Like that's in every draft.
I'm sure.
It's
funny.
It's a different character in the older ones, but the idea is there.
As soon as that happened, I was like, well, obviously he's going to go get him. And then it finally cut back to him after like a few more scenes. I was like, yep, where is he? Drop the bat out of the sky.
I appreciated how dark the tone was.
Yes. Yeah, it was so good.
Like the movie does not pull any punches.
No, it's a strength that it's R-rated. This and Renfield, which we just keep comparing because they're both Universal monster movies about the same character in the same year. This and Renfield do completely different tones and types of movies, and in my opinion, they kind of nail what they're doing.
Yeah.
Like this is a really good horror movie. Renfield is a really good action comedy movie. I think they both achieve their own goals in their own ways. I prefer Demeter, but I do give them the same score out of 10, so they're pretty close in my mind.
I would put Renfield a little below Demeter because the first act of that movie, where it's like really heavy on like the cop stuff, is kind of meh. But it gets a lot better by the end.
You're probably wondering what's going on. Wait, that was too much. Let's rewind. Yeah, that gets pretty grating.
Isn't that every movie now?
It's every movie forever. It never stops. They all think they're unique. They all think that I'm the clever one. I'm the unique one. Like, there was one unique one. It was Deadpool. It was fun. Stop doing Deadpool. Like, goddamn. Demeter, in a much less cringe way, does that too. They start at the end like, wait a minute, the ship went down. Let's start at the beginning.
Well, I think that was just their way of acknowledging, like, people who know Dracula know what happens. I think that's just their way of tipping the hat to that.
Yeah, it was for like the opposite effect, where like, oh, the people that don't know the plot of Dracula, they're like, oh shit, the ship is doomed. Interesting, like a cold open. Yeah, the last thing I want to mention about the movie before we get to the big boy talking point is I thought the score was pretty underwhelming. There were scenes where like, had you taken the score out, it would have actually been scarier. But because it's like kind of stock horror noises, I was like, okay, I've seen this done. It reminds me of like in action movies where they just play like the action drums, and now it's time for the action part. Dun 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 dun. Like you've heard that in 10,000 films.
Yes.
So, like, yeah, a little bit of that going on.
Well, there was a thing with the score where one guy was hired and he couldn't do it because of scheduling issues, so they brought in Bear McCreary, who's usually very good.
Bear McCreary, I feel like I've heard that name.
He did Godzilla King of the Monsters. He did the Walking Dead theme. He's normally very good, but I guess, there was time constraints. It was supposed to come out in January, and then they pushed it to August, I guess because no one anticipated Barbenheimer lasting as long as it did.
Yeah, that's a good point, yeah. I'm so glad this was not a January shuffled off to die film, because, like, so much crap comes out in January and February. It's like, it's the dumping ground of movies that, like, studios have no faith in.
God, I don't see January movies most of the time.
Nobody does. You're just getting off the holiday season. You don't have money. No one's asking to go outside. It's a dumpster month.
I mean, this year had a good January because it had Infinity Pool, but...
That movie make money?
It didn't make money, but it was a good movie.
Oh, okay. Good point.
I don't know how much money it made. I'd have to look.
That was my last kind of note, would be the score. I thought was not the greatest. I look back at, like, the Lighthouse's score. It's, like, 45 minutes total of the film. That's like, what, half of the runtime? So that's, that means half of the movie there wasn't a score at all, which emphasized those points. Whereas I feel like this is just the whole time, there's just a running score in the background, even during dialogue.
I wonder if this is one of those cases where the score was like, there was a lot more score than ended up in the movie. Because I've listened to movie scores from relatively recent stuff where I'm like, I don't remember this being in the movie anywhere.
I feel like Wong in Infinity War, like, what, you wanted more? Or an Endgame. Is that everyone? Is there more score left? What, you wanted more score in Demeter?
Like, did they not utilize everything they had properly or something like that?
No, they just utilized everything they had.
But I guess we should. I guess we should get on to the ending.
Right. I'm done nitpicking. I want to talk about the meat and potatoes of Demeter, which is, of course, the last maybe 5 minutes after the climax. Well, okay, real quick. The climax was fun. I enjoyed the climax. I like the final tying himself to the ship.
Yes.
And then they you could say team up, but they really don't win at all. I like that. I like the aspect where they're just, no matter how hard they try, they're just doomed. And the best they can ever hope for is to escape.
They basically just fight back enough so that Clemens, spoilers, Clemens, Corey Hawkins' character, manages to get away with the girl. And Dracula gets bodied by the mast.
Yes, he does. He gets whooped.
He gets it's like a mousetrap.
It is. No, in a much less good movie, the monster would have died. They would have been able to kill the monster. But A, you can't because it's chapter 7 of Dracula. You know, there's more Dracula left. And then B, this movie I liked. I probably wouldn't have liked it if she like cut the mast, it went through Dracula's chest and he exploded. I'd be like, what the fuck?
Well, there is one where they, in one of the drafts, where they do like impale him, but I guess they missed the heart.
Interesting. You know, I kind of expected a scene after he got bodied by the thing where it cuts to him real quick and he transforms into a wolf.
Yeah, that should be in there. In fact, I think pretty much every draft shows the wolf leaping out of the wreckage.
Except this one. Wow.
In fact, there's a scene earlier in the movie where the character, I think his name is Petrovsky, like he sees Dracula like kind of lurking underneath the staircase, starts crawling towards him, and he very casually is like, well, how did you get here? That's a scene that's like almost word for word from the 2010 draft. Only there, he's in the wolf form, so the reaction makes a little more sense.
Oh my god. All right, well, with all this down and out of the way, let's get into the real reason we're here, which is, of course, the last 2 minutes of the last Voyage of the Demeter. So basically, the Demeter crashes, the captain's log is found, it's just like the book, it's all well and good. Dracula, of course, as we've mentioned, does not run out as a wolf, which we all expected, and which you're saying is now in every other draft.
Yes.
Which is fascinating. But notable divergence, Clemens and the girl are alive on the mast and escaped Dracula, and because she's a vampire, she blows up when the sun rises. It's very sad. Yeah. It's so emotional. Oh, my goodness. But basically, Clemens goes off and he's alive. Then, the last 2 minutes of the movie, you hear a little bit of over monologue about how he's obsessed with finding him and you got to make it make sense. I need the world to make sense. I gotta stop him. And then he sees Dracula, and Dracula is wearing human clothes, but he still looks like an orc from Lord of the Rings.
He's banging the cane up and down just to like fuck with him.
Just to fuck with him, which the silver wolf cane, I was like, shit, that's 2010's the wolf.
Yes, I was going to say that because you see it a couple times in the movie and it looks near identical to the 2010 Wolfman cane, just made out of wood.
Dude, it has to be intentional. Like, it has to be like a purposeful nod.
It's weird because this movie was not made by Universal. They're just distributing it.
Right, but I feel like if they ever wanted to do, like, if they want to make a new universe, they now have a window to be like, if they use that cane, that can be the Wolfman's cane. I'm not saying that's a good idea. I'm saying that that's what they want to do.
No. So all I'm thinking of is, did Dracula meet Max von Sydow's character and also get left a cane on a train?
Oh, man, no.
It's so weird.
That scene was cut, I believe.
It's in the director's cut.
It is, which we commentated on. I didn't even realize it was a director's cut. But, yeah, no, so Clemens is, he's there, and he sees Dracula looking like literally a monster from, like, every 80s horror movie.
He's wearing the coat and a hat.
Coat and hat, it's like a joke. And then the Dracula, he walks by, or maybe not walks by, it was like a vision.
He's got the Ninja Turtle disguise.
He does, and he has the Batman disappearing act as well. And Clemens is like, oh shit, I'm gonna brush my neck, and he's not there. So then you hear the monologue where he's like, I'm gonna devote my life to destroying them. I'm gonna hunt him down. He's gonna blow up when I shove my stake in his chest or something. And then it ends.
Which he doesn't do.
I kept expecting, I texted you this, I was like, I kept expecting the ending to be like, I'll hunt him down, or my name isn't Clemens Van Helsing, and then it ends.
Yeah,
It was so close to that.
It would be better if they took out the voiceover. Like, it would still be
Yeah.
weird, but it would fit the movie more because you still get the idea that he's looking for him.
Yeah, or maybe put the voiceover of the captain's log, which, by the way, I hate voiceover in movies most of the time. Captain's log voiceover was really good and was well used here.
It fit. It filled. It did what the captain's log is supposed to do.
Yeah.
It's what every Star Trek thing does with the captain's log.
Yeah, and I like how the captain's log narration is just what the captain is writing, but it is not a full summary of the events because that's what we're seeing. I hate narration, which is just telling you things that you're learning anyway because I'm watching the damn movie. Like,
Yeah.
I like how there's a specific divergence there. It's very interesting. But the Clemens narration at the end was not necessary at all.
Okay, you want to hear something interesting?
Yes.
Original drafts had a similar, the 2004 one and the 2010 one have like a very similar kind of ending scene where he's in a pub. He's not in London. He's just in a pub because he's like drinking and depressed. And a man walks in and goes, I've heard your story, blah, 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 blah. And he goes, by the way, my name is Van Helsing. And then it ends.
Yeah, okay. I mean, whatever it is, when I got to that ending, I was like, okay, what is the sequel bait? Are you going to make him Van Helsing? Or are you going to meet another Universal? Is Dr. Frankenstein going to walk out? Like, what's going on here?
Come to talk to you about the House Initiative.
The House Initiative. Oh, my God. The whole Dark Universe mummy was just, I'm going to talk to you about the House Initiative, but it was the Prodigium Initiative.
Yeah, it's so funny because this character is not in Dracula. He's not going to kill Dracula. It just makes me think of, I don't know if you've ever heard of this. There's a Lord of the Rings video game called The Third Age.
I've heard of it.
Basically what it is that EA only had the rights to take stuff from the movies. So they only had so much material for games. So what they did for this game is they basically had a group of characters come together who are like the dime store version of the Fellowship. And they're like following in the Fellowship's trail and like almost meeting them, like, oh shit, they run up to the bridge of Khazad-dûm right as they're running away from the Balrog and stuff like that. So I'm just seeing this as like, oh, Clemens is gonna be like the B team from the Third Age.
Literally. That's so funny. They're like, hey, we're here too. What I thought would happen, which I would be really interested in, is if they make this a trilogy, but it's just adapting one book. So, like, the next one is, like, more of the plot of Dracula, and the third one is, like, the climax of the book Dracula. I think if you have Clemens as the main, and you, like, write in this as, like, one of the main guys, that could be one of the most interesting ways to do the book ever, because I've never seen one book be a trilogy.
That's sort of what the BBC Netflix Dracula show did, where it's, like, 3 feature-length episodes adapting different parts of the book.
Yeah, and the first 2 are wonderful.
And the third one should have been 2 episodes because there's too much shit crammed into it.
I hate the explanation for the weaknesses.
Oh, yeah.
In any case, the Demeter episode is like fantastic television. Like it might even be better than the Demeter movie. You know what? I will say it. The Demeter episode of the Dracula BBC show is even better than the last Voyage of the Demeter.
I'd need to watch that episode again.
It's so goddamn good. I've seen the whole thing once, and then I've seen the first 2 episodes again. I just end it right at the second one. I'm like, all set. No need to watch.
You end it at that cliffhanger?
Yeah.
Or do you stop watching the episode early?
Pretty much at the cliffhanger, so I can remind myself why I'm not watching the third one. Oh man, yeah, it's a wild ride. Demeter, the last voyage of, as it were. Demeter, the last voyage of which is its full legal God-given government name. I had a great time with this movie. The ending is
weird.
Probably my least favorite part. Yeah. I mean, I didn't hate the ending. I wasn't super against it, but it just feels to me like they just couldn't help themselves but try and set up 100 more movies.
Yeah.
And at least with The Invisible Man, they did the ending in such a way where it left itself open to sequels or universes or whatever they wanted, but it also concluded the story. Whereas I guess Demeter is a conclusion because the main thrust of the story is resolved, but man, him walking towards camera saying, I'm going to hunt Dracula down, and it cuts to black, like, holy sequel bait.
Yeah, if you just cut the voiceover out, it wouldn't be that bad.
Yeah. You could even, like, end it on the girl dying when the sun rises. Like, that's a tragic end for that character.
Yeah.
And maybe have him drink in a bar and see Dracula. Like, you could do something else, but the way they have it now is like Like, please give us a sequel. Please give us another $50 million.
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
Though it's super not going to happen. It's just tragic. Like, I wanted to see the Dracula trilogy. That's what I wanted.
No, we're just going to get another random Dracula movie from Universal eventually.
Eventually, like, yeah, in the same year with a different genre. Yeah, we're just going to get tons of those now.
You know what I'm hoping happens, though, is that because Universal Studios they're building a new park in Orlando, and like part of the new park is going to be Universal Monster themed.
Yep.
Demeter ride.
Oh, please, let's do it.
Yeah, that would be cool. Do we know what the next Universal thing is going to be?
No, there's nothing on the docket. And it's weird, too, because as you and I have complained in the past, the Universal Monster Wikipedia page has been, like, blown up. There's, like, no information there. So it's not like there's, like, this, like, the MCU list where you can just look at the upcoming films. There's nothing like that.
Well, I mean, there's all these things that have gotten pitched, like Tom Hardy's Stranger Things Frankenstein, Chloe Zhao's Dracula, which is, I think she's taking it somewhere else.
A lot of them have been Dracula pitches, which is not surprising that the last two have just been random Dracula pitches, you know?
Bride of Frankenstein, which they canceled.
When you do the ending, that's such a big cliffhang that you want like people to like tune into the next one. What you're doing is you're sacrificing the individuality of the movie, which means that if, and most likely, it doesn't get a sequel, it's always tainted by that. And if you ever watch it again, you get that same ending. You're like, great, glad it never went anywhere.
Director's cut on the DVD, maybe? Oh, wait, they don't make DVDs anymore.
Director's cut on the streaming service, maybe?
Go straight to Peacock. Yeah, now imagine in the bar, it was Luke Evans.
Oh, Luke Evans at the end, Nick Cage at the end. Nick Cage at the end, we already talked about it, but that would have been
funny.
Such a retcon because that would not line up with Renfield at all in the slightest, let alone the tone.
I mean, Renfield doesn't even line up with Dracula 1931 if you really look at it.
No, it does. It's a joke sequel. It's pretending that it's a sequel, which I think is funny about it. But no, I don't want any Luke Evans. I don't want any of those people. Definitely don't CGI resurrect Bela Lugosi. That's even worse.
Oh, go about Flash style.
No, the optimal way to watch this film is to start watching 1931's Dracula, pause at the stock footage scene, watch the entirety of this movie, pause before the end of this movie where Corey Hawkins is in like whatever, and then hit play on the rest of 1931's Dracula. That is the full Bram Stoker Dracula experience.
Ah, might as well.
Overall, Demeter, I think, is such a strong movie, and despite its flaws, I am very sad to see the lack of box office return, and you can't even blame it on Barbenheimer anymore because it's been like a month almost. So that's just on this movie not doing so well. And yeah, granted, a lot of it was the reviews. If it had like high 90s like Ninja Turtles, maybe it would have been a better box office.
I think a lot of people didn't even know this movie was coming out.
Yeah, it did kind of sneak up on them. I didn't see a trailer until like a couple months ago.
I mean, this is a year where like everything is bombing. Pretty much.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, even Dead Reckoning is underperforming, which is insane.
Dead Reckoning is fantastic. Yeah, no, so in any case, Demeter is really great. I'm glad we had this discussion. I was going to have this discussion, like, anyway. I'm glad we had it now, because I got to air all my thoughts, my love for it, my frustrations with it.
Go see it, and stay out of the light.